made you pay $4 plus.
Yeah, I just paid. I just paid 6. And I only have one egg. You know, in this thing, they get you coming and I get you going.
Straight Jones, or 6 eggs, organic. I could pay like.
Who's ready for some music? No, you want us to go home? I said, who's ready for some music? See, you guys are the real fans. You know, everybody else bounced, 10 minutes, whatever. Like, much appreciated. I can tell you people are really here for the arts, true appreciators of the arts. My opinion is not biased at all. This is totally, yeah.
You're all back. All right there, the dancing.
folks. You've already met John. You already know about Olivia. I'd like to introduce you to our drummer, B-E-Z, Bez. Bez is a native from the Bronx, but the first person in his family born in America. His parents hailing from Ethiopia. And, Bez is an expert in all these amazing, not just East African styles, but also West African styles of music. And he plays with many African artists all the time, and a graduate of Berkeley College in Boston. I call him the best drummer in New York City because he is. We recently recorded an album, and we didn't record it to a click. And the engineer asked me, where's the click track? What's the tempo? It's like, no. Bez is just that good. Thank you so much, folks. On trumpet is Mr. Jimmy Rose. Woo! I call him Mr. Jimmy Rose because he's a teacher here in New York City. You know, I think especially people who teach music, they get this really bad rap. There's this stigma. It's like, oh, if you can't do, then you teach. And there's a lot of people who think like, oh, well, you know, he's a music teacher. Like, oh, he must not be as good as the rest of the people in New York. But come on, show of applause. Is Jimmy as good as the rest of them? And by the way, I don't know if you know this, but New York City, there used to be a huge band program in every single New York City public school. They, for the most part, got rid of it, and now they're rebuilding the music program in New York, and Jimmy is part of that effort. You know, there are tons of studies that show that playing music improves test scores, it improves cognitive ability. You know, they've done MRI tests. Playing music is the only thing you can do that engages your entire brain. All 5 lobes of your brain gets used when you're playing music. It's like exercise for your thinking muscle. And Jimmy is teaching people how to do that every single day, and I think he deserves a lot of respect. He definitely has my respect and admiration for it. Seriously, it's a lot harder to be a teaching musician than it is to just be a musician. Thank you so much, folks. So, I don't know if you know, but at the end of this month, there's this thing happening. It's called the New York City Pride Parade. And last year, we had the honor of marching with the skincare company Kiehl's. And this year, we get the honor of doing it again. So if you're at the Pride Parade and you see the Kiehl's float, make sure to wave and say hi to us. We will also be there with Bob's Dance Shop, a really amazing, really famous dance troupe. We're honored to get the opportunity to perform with them again. Without further ado, the song of the month. thanks to Nile Rodgers for writing that tune. He set out to write an anthem for the gay community, and truly, nail on the head. He threaded the needle. If you don't know Nile Rodgers, you should check him out. One of the most talented musicians of our generation. Let's go, girls! Thank you so much, folks. That's it for us for today. Give it up for the band. John Aarons on trombone. Olivia Hugert on saxophone. Jimmy Rose on trumpet. B.E.Z. Bez from the Bronx on drums. A big thank you to Meg and Tony for making this happen. A big thank you to everybody at Bryant Park for making this happen. This is a group effort. We have the easiest, most fun jobs. Everybody else does the really, really hard work. So folks, please give it up for them. They really deserve it. Thank you all for being such a great audience. Taking photos and videos, please tag us at Triad Brass. Follow us at Triad Brass on all the major platforms. We have a CD coming out in a few weeks. It's called The Power of Friendship. Please look out for it on streaming platforms. We're going to Banda Folles in France this July. If you're going to France in July and you happen to be in the French countryside, come check it out. And we're going to be at the Pride Parade at the end of the month. So many fun, cool things happening. If you want to find a full show schedule, go to www.triadbrass.com/shows. Have a fun and safe evening, folks. You've been a great audience. Give it up for yourselves. Come on. Good behavior should be rewarded, right? Nobody yelled at anybody. Everybody had a good time. It was a good day.
Favor for you, I'm so sorry. I'm in town for work and I have to get to the collar. And there you go.
Oh yeah, man, super car. That's all. Hi Taylor. You got a place for tuba? Oh, you Mr. Holland Jones. An amazing movie, one of my favorites. Yes, and I think it's a really accurate, like, it was very good. Yes.
All right, folks. This is New York City in Bryant Park. Yeah. Things are changing, though.
Everything that works, they don't have money.
Right?
Mr. Holland Thomas, I told Jimmy about it.
Yes. One of my favorites. Thanks, folks, for tuning in. That's it for us for today. Hope to see you soon. And yeah, thanks for tuning in.